Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to Sports Time HQ. I'm your host, Fernando. Joining with me today is many different people. We got our co-host back, Keith. After being gone for a month, he clearly doesn't like us anymore, but he's back. We got Gary once again back, but we have someone who we had a couple years ago. It's Mr. Eric Moody from ESPN and NFL and all-around writer, great writer from ESPN. Eric, I'll start with you. How are you doing?
No, things are great. It's the summer. We do have some hot weather, but it's good to catch up on the summertime activities. Barbecuing and partaking in some adult beverages responsibly. All those things that we like to do during the summer. But I think the thing that always gets me during this time of the year, which I'm excited to be on, by the way, thanks for the invite again, is that it's kind of like the calm before the storm, right? Before training camp starts and a lot of fantasy content, kind of hits the internet. And so a lot of drafts too in August. So it's really an exciting time. And I'm looking forward to chatting ball with you, gentlemen.
Yeah, obviously it's officially summer. It's going to be great time. Obviously, Eric, you're down south, so you got heat all year round. Luckily, up here in the north, it's not too bad, but it's still hot.
Oh, yeah.
But let's get into it. Let's go talk some news and notes around the league. Let's start with Jamal Adams, safety. He signed with the Titans, former Seattle Seahawk, former Keith's guy. He signed to a 1-year contract. And I mean, I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this. In my personal opinion, Titans offense, I kind of see them as like a high ceiling, low floor type of team. But the defense overall does not look that bad.
I think it's a good addition for the Titans. I don't think he was a great fit for the Seahawks. I'm not sad to see him go. From my point of view, the Titans need bulking up there. He's kind of this hybrid linebacker that the Seahawks used. That was kind of very odd, didn't work out. But yeah, I think there's plenty of potential for the Titans. They're rebuilding, so I think he's a good experienced head to have in their backfield there.
Yeah, I completely agree. I agree 100%, Fernando, with your Titans take. I think that, I think they are a QB away. I'm not the big Will Levis believer like some people are. I agree with you that their defense looks pretty good right now, and they just lost Kevin Byard, so they needed someone to fill that slot. Jamal Adams maybe still has some in the tank. We'll see how that goes, but Titans, I agree. High ceiling, low floor. We'll see how they do.
Yeah, I think the one thing with Adams, so you think about Tennessee, so they've got Amani Hooker and Elijah Molden listed as their starters right now. So you bring in Adams, and he's obviously going to compete, for one of those spots, when training camp opens on the 23rd. I would say my biggest concern, in hindsight, hey, it's a great move to bring him in, but I'm just concerned about his health and reliability. You've got over 4 years in Seattle. Adams missed 33 of a possible 67 regular season games. He's been productive when on the field, but that's the question. Will it be on the field for the Titans? I don't know, but I do like the signing.
Eric, I'll ask you, and then I'll go back around the clockwise, This Titans team, they're in a division that's kind of tough, you could say. Jacksonville, obviously, having a little bit tough team. Couldn't really sneak into the playoffs last year, but the Texans, really good with C.J. Stroud, and then you have the up-and-coming Colts. Are these Titans have any chance to even make playoffs this season?
That is a tough one. I think most of the most of the sports books would have their win total at 6.5 or 7.5 wins, for the most part. You know what? I just don't see it. I'm just kind of thinking that I like the direction where they're going, because I'm going to talk about Will Levis obviously here in a little bit, but I like the direction where they're going. But just with the other teams in the division, I just think it's going to be a tough road for them to make the postseason. So I'll kind of stick to answering that question. I think it's going to be very difficult.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that. I think that, the AFC is just too stacked. I don't know if they can compete for a playoff spot right now. We're looking at the AFC North, where all 4 teams could potentially be playoff teams. It's easy to even think that, but it's possible. And I don't see the Titans being able to snag a spot over any of those guys, let alone the possibility of the Colts or the Jags also getting a playoff spot themselves. Even though I do think that the Jags are the worst team in that division. I like the look of the Titans, but like I said, I think they're a quarterback away. They could be doing something special also.
Yeah, I think the schedule is pretty brutal too. Like you brought up some great points. Brutal division and brutal schedule. I would say it's even the hardest schedule in the division. It's just going to be a difficult road. I just don't think they're ready yet.
Yeah, I agree with the guys. I mean, I don't think maybe they'll be as bad as what some people think or the sports books, but I don't think they're making the playoffs this season. They're one for the future anyway.
I think they will not. Sorry, it just
I was waiting for
had to do something with it. I couldn't just keep agreeing with y'all, but no. The Titans, I'd like to see, and I think Eric, you're kind of on the same boat. Like, you guys want to see a progression with them. You want to see like the next step with the Tennessee Titans. Obviously, they're a team that's maybe a year or two, maybe 3 out. But if Will Levis, which we'll talk about again later, if he can produce, then this team really has a chance to start making a push in the coming years. So let's go into the next round of news and notes. I don't know if you guys heard about this, but there's a Dallas writer, I forget who it was. He mentioned that the Cowboys running back Ezekiel Elliott could actually get cut from Dallas. He's only $1.6 million in guarantees. I don't see this happening. And personally, I think they'd be dumb to let go of Zeke. I think Zeke still got enough in the tank for him this season. And I'll talk about him maybe later. But I just don't see a way where they would cut Zeke from this lineup.
Yeah. I'd be very surprised if they cut Zeke without bringing anyone else in. It's not like they have like a rake
Leonard Fournette.
Maybe, but I mean they don't have a rake of talent at the position, so they would need to do something. But I'd be very surprised if he's cut.
Yeah, I think the Cowboys at this point, since Zeke has had a previous tour of duty with the team, I'm like they really know what to expect from Elliott at this point. I think he's best paired with another running back as part of a committee. So you got Rico Dowdle that's there. And I think it's great news for him, whether they keep Elliott or not, kind of is a sign that he'll be actively involved in the backfield. So from a fantasy perspective, I think that's a guy that you don't want to leave your drafts, without, Rico Dowdle. But I would say as far as like with Elliott, I think with this news kind of, I would say brings in a little bit more risk with Elliott, like as a potential fantasy starter. You may have some teams that are putting together like a 0 running back build who may be looking for Zeke to be a starter for their teams. It's kind of on shaky ground right now, right? Based on this news.
Yeah, I don't think it would make sense to me to do it, though. You just brought him in. I think you guys have had the relationship for a while, and I think making this deal happen is an attempt to bind it back together. It just wouldn't make sense to me, at least, a month later, just completely throwing it out the window. I think Zeke's going to stay. I think the Cowboys are going to be happy with the move that they made. I think he's going to be productive this season.
Some more notes, if I can get the word right. Davante Adams, he mentioned that Aaron Rodgers wants a reunion in New York. I mean, we kind of already seen this happen. We kind of know that Aaron Rodgers wants to play with Davante Adams. It's been in his ear. I'll ask you guys real quick, is there a potential for a trade in New York for Davante Adams?
No, not a chance. I mean, this is like if you say it enough, maybe like the wish will come true. You know what I mean? I don't see it happening anytime soon.
Yeah, neither do I. Yeah, I don't see it. I think we're all mesmerized by how productive Adams and Aaron Rodgers were together. I think Adams averaged 8.6 targets and 16 fantasy points per game, with Rodgers. But I agree with everyone else so far. It's unlikely to happen. But wishful thinking, though.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. As much as I would love to see them back together, I think Davante even said himself that it's not in the near future. So, unfortunate, but I can't see it where it happens.
And obviously a follow-up is Davante Adams talked about Aiden O'Connell has an edge on Gardner Minshew, and all signs point to Aiden O'Connell being the starter. I personally still think it should be Gardner Minshew that becomes a starter in Las Vegas. Thoughts?
I'd probably rather Gardner for fantasy purpose when not for him specifically, but more for Devontae Adams. I'm not so sure on Hayden O'Connell whatsoever, and I'm very much out on Devontae Adams right now. But I'd much rather Minshew.
Yeah, I kind of think it's one of those scenarios where I think both players are going to make starts. Like you could see Minshew starting 8 games, O'Connell starting 9. So it's going to be one of those kind of situations. So not necessarily a quarterback scenario that I want to back in fantasy, but there are a number of Raiders players like Zamir White, Devontae Adams, Brock Bowers that I'm intrigued with from a fantasy lens. But the quarterback situation I'm avoiding. So it doesn't really matter who's under center, right? Both are going to make starts.
Yeah, that's a high possibility. From my point of view, I'd rather have Minshew. Just through the years, obviously, I'm much more happy with what he's done in the league than Aiden O'Connell last year. But of course, O'Connell has a 1-year sample size, so things could change. But I want to make it known that Devontae Adams is going to get his no matter what.
You're still a huge Devontae Adams fan.
Right about that. Of course I am. Come on now.
So, moral of the story is we might be seeing a Fitzmagic, Jameis Winston type of season with these two quarterbacks.
Possible.
Yeah.
Last set of news around the league is Bill Belichick. He finally has himself a good job. He's joining Inside the NFL, along with making weekly appearances on ESPN with the Pat McAfee Show and Monday Night Football Manning's Cast. So he's not coaching this season, but, he's got a lot of on-air time that he's going to have this season.
Is this you just trying to get your Patriots segment into the show? Okay, we'll give you that one.
He's no longer a Patriot. No longer a Patriot. That's pretty much it. That's all I got. You guys got any more news and notes around the league?
I'm good.
No, I'm good. Let's get into those breakout players and other things. Let's do it.
Rising stars, breakout quarterbacks. This time around, I'm going to start with the quarterback that I have loved since coming into the NFL. This guy has faced injuries in recent years, finished as QB 19, QB 27 last season. It's Kyler Murray. He is currently being drafted as the QB 10, and I think it should be a lot higher than what he was. QB 4 is my projected 2024 finish. And let's be real. He came back in week 10 last season. He was a top 12 quarterback in 4 of those last 8 weeks, 18 plus fantasy points in 5 of the last 8. He was on pace. If you average those 8 games out, he was on pace to have 317, just over 317 fantasy points, which would have been good for QB 6 last season. Upgraded offensive line, Trey McBride, stellar tight end coming into this league, young tight end, loves Kyler Murray. Marvin Harrison, he was just drafted. That's the wide receiver 1 over there in Arizona. I think sky's the limit for Kyler Murray. I would be shocked if he's outside the QB top 5 quarterbacks this season.
Interesting. I like the call. I like Russian QBs, so I'm all in on Kyler with you there. Whether he gets as high as QB4, I'm not too sure, but I could see him in the 5, 6, 7 range. All right. I like this. I like this pick a lot.
Yeah, no, I like it as well. I think Kyler Murray is a great option. They're trying to position him for success. With Marvin Harrison Jr. should be a lot healthier coming to the season. Keith mentioned, with him being like a dual threat quarterback. So that's obviously a plus, like in fantasy. But he's a nice value, in ESPN leagues right now. He is the QB 9 in leagues. And so he's a low end QB 1, in my opinion, someone who's definitely being overlooked. But you should have him on your radar.
Yep, good pick, Freddie. I think we had talked about this last week or 2 weeks ago. Kyler is being undervalued right now, and we both think that he's going to be a great quarterback. Keith, you're right. I don't know if he's going to be quarterback 4, but I do think that he's got a chance to easily crack into that, top 7. So if he's there late in your draft, take a stab at him.
I'm going to be excited when we finally disagree on a player or something today, guys. I would love it. Keith,
I was just about to say, I'm sure you'll disagree with a lot of mine because I had to pivot because all you guys saw my players. So great. So Jaden Daniels is my guy. Currently, he's QB 14 in ADP. I think he cracks the top 10 easy because, like I said, with Kyler Murray, I like Russian quarterbacks. He's got the Russian upside. I think he can get in there instead of, I don't know, Goff, Purdy, these type of guys. Even Dak. Dak needs to have that type of year he had last year in fantasy football. I think he has better arm than Lamar Jackson. Maybe not, as good Russian, but he's got that kind of combo that I think that works really well. And I think the Washington found their quarterback here. So I really think he's a guy late on in drafts that you can wait on and get. And I think he can get into the top 10.
I like it, but
I was waiting on you. You'd be slow there, Fernando. You don't really like it, do you?
I like the potential that Jaden Daniel has with this team. The only thing that I think will help Jaden Daniels' case the most is if they do get Brandon Ayuk. If they somehow trade for Brandon Ayuk, I think Jaden Daniels could probably or very well be the best quarterback in this draft. Unfortunately, I love JJ McCarthy, but I'd be all in on Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, no, I would. Go ahead. Yeah, it's funny because I was like, I'm sure we'll disagree eventually, but right. I think that's probably the big takeaway from Keith's guy is that look at the average draft position on where he's going.
Yeah,
I'm thinking about Jaden Daniels for ESPN leagues. I think he's a QB 12, and he's a QB 12 right now, and so I think he's going right now where he could potentially finish. I would say my only negative spin on it would be where he's being drafted right now, he's going to have to, I guess, perform the way that we expect. If there's any kind of dip or fluctuation, it could end up being okay, he's not delivering right now. But with the rushing ability and the people that are surrounding him, even if they don't get Brandon Ayuk, I think he's still a solid QB, especially in Superflex. They were comfortable with him as my QB2, right?
Yeah. Not a bad one, Keith. I don't know how to feel about Jaden Daniels. I actually think, though, the Commanders are going to have good offensive weapons around him. I think McLaurin's going to get boosted so high. I think Eckler is being crazily undervalued right now. But for Jaden Daniels' first year, I don't know if he's going to be a top 10 quarterback or whatever it was that you had said. In a few years, I can for sure see it, especially with this rushing upside. But I think that last year at LSU, it was just too easy for him. He was on the field so much that defense was really, really bad. I think that he's going to be facing, NFL defenses now. It's going to be a tough start to his career, I think, but I think he's going to figure it out in a few years.
I statted Jaden Daniels finishing as QB 20 this season. Might be a little criminal, but I just don't see potential for him. I think the rushing upside's there, and I just think that they need something, and they're missing a piece. And that's why I think Brandon Ayuk is so important for the Commanders to get him. Because if they can get him, I think this team will really, really benefit from Brandon Ayuk.
Agreed.
So, Gary, we'll go with you. Who's your guy?
Yeah, so I was looking at the quarterback position, and I was kind of intrigued by two guys, but I actually didn't go with either of them. This guy broke out last year, and I just went with Jordan Love. He's
I gotta
not.
clip that. I gotta clip that. That was too funny.
If you're sitting here and you're watching this, and you're like, well, I wouldn't really classify him as a breakout player for this year. I still would, because he was quarterback 5 last year. I think he has such a high possibility to be within the top 3. Like, what I see from Jordan Love, and you may think it's cliche, but I really do see a young Aaron Rodgers. The way he throws off his back foot, it's so effortless, and we really saw him throughout the entire year, not just a half or a quarter of the year towards the end or even the playoffs. We saw that he's that guy that can get the job done, and he looks great doing it. So I love Jordan Love, and I think that if you're going to get him at a good value, you have to get him on your team. Yeah,
I love it. ESPN formats, I mean, he's being drafted as the QB 10, and I think he really should be a top 5 quarterback. I think he's really good. It's a lot of these young quarterbacks really coming in. Like I think Jordan Love, CJ Stroud, those 2 young quarterbacks that are really making a name for themselves, that are going to really be on everybody's radar for the next 5-10 years.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to it's kind of hard to go against this. I'm like, if you look at Love, he had 6 top 10 finishes in his final 8 games. I'm like, he was 8th or better in passing yards, attempts, completions, and also with ADOT. Also while finishing second in passing touchdowns as well. And pretty good balance where you look at touchdown interception ratio. So I think he's going where he belongs right now, but there is upside for much, much more. He's actually my QB2 in the Scott Fish Bowl right now. So I wanted to make sure that I got him, and I had to draft him early. I had like at the first pick, so the 1-on-1, I basically had to take him in the second round. I just wanted to solidify my quarterback situation. So I started off with Josh Allen and Jordan Love. So I'm very happy about that.
Nice.
That's really nice. That's a nice duo right there.
Yeah.
I like Jordan Love like everybody else. My problem is to crack the top 5. I think he needs to have more of a rushing upside, just the way fantasy football is going these days. I mean, Pat Mahomes is the only one that really cracks it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Without having the rushing upside. So I don't mind him being 5, but I think to get in the top 4, I think you need more of a rushing upside. So that's kind of what I think about that one.
Yeah. I think this is all really good quarterbacks, but will we dislike Eric's next pick?
Yeah, I already know it'll definitely be some dislikes on this. That's what makes this show intriguing. So I'm gonna go with Will Levis here. So the one thing about Levis, let's kind of get around the campfire. Let's go through the story. So we all know what happened last year, right? Ryan Tannehill, very up and down. You had Levis making his first start against the Falcons in Week 8, and we all remember that game, right? I think Levis completed 19 to 29 passes for 238 yards and 4 touchdowns. I'm like, we were thinking that, hey, this guy could be a potential league winner. That obviously did not happen. His performances the rest of the season nearly weren't as epic, right? So I think one thing that's really interesting with Levis, though, he has his first full offseason under his belt as an NFL player. A lot of growth can happen during that time frame. And he's got a new coaching staff. You got Brian Callahan taking over as the head coach. And I think what this staff wants to do, from what I've read, is really to better position Levis to take advantage of higher percentage throws, which should help stabilize his fantasy value. Because that wasn't the case like last year. We all know the arm strength. He clearly has the arm strength to deliver the football anywhere on the field. But they're trying to position him for success. You've got DeAndre Hopkins that's obviously still there. You also added Calvin Ridley. You got Tony Pollard. You got Tajay Spears that's already there. So he's got 2 reliable kind of running backs that can act as receivers out of the backfield. And the Titans have also improved their offensive line. And so you're not going to get many rushing yards from Levis. I know we're talking about rushing quarterbacks. So he's going to have to really do all of his damage from the pocket. But I really like Levis more so in super flex formats. If you're kind of waiting at quarterback, picking up Levis as like your QB2. But I really like leaving every super flex league, like if it's a 12-team league, we'll say, like with Levis as my QB3. But I do feel like he has the potential to finish as like a mid-range QB2 this year, given the circumstances.
I'll speak on it. I'm obviously, I think I made this clear earlier, not a Will Levis guy. But I do think that he's going to be better this year. A large part is just due to the fact that, he's got Ridley now. He's got, as you mentioned, a full offseason under his belt, which, agreed, a lot can happen to a player. My issue is just I felt like he looked very uncomfortable at times last year. Of course, any young player would in big scenarios. I just never really was a Will Levis believer. If he shuts me up, I'm happy with it. I'll take it on the chin and I'll give him his props. But we'll see. Like I said, I think the Titans are a quarterback away. If he plays great, then I think the Titans are a really good team.
I haven't finished this QB 25. I just don't see a world. I think Levis really holds this team back, in my opinion. Obviously, we have an aging DeAndre Hopkins, an aging Calvin Ridley, who's about to turn 30 soon. And then, obviously, you have what we used to have big pick Treylon Burks, who is like 4th in depth chart. Tyler Boyd's there. I mean, Chikozima Okonkwo I really love, and I just really want Okonkwo to be something, but I just think Levis is holding this team back, just like how Daniel Jones is holding back the Giants. I just don't see a world where Levis is going to deliver what, Eric, you want. And I think next season, Tennessee is going to have to do something and find a quarterback. Because even if you look at that draft that they drafted Will Levis, there was really no quarterback in that draft that was spectacular. And it's still proven it. And I just don't see a world where Levis will do it.
That's harsh, comparing him to Daniel Jones. Come
Sorry,
on, man. We need
sorry.
Will Levis to go. So this was my quarterback originally as well. So I'm in on Will Levis for all the reasons you basically said, Eric. And he's going on the ADP here. I see he's QB 24. I think he can get up to between the 18 20 mark easy, and then, you know, maybe, I don't know if he goes top 15, but he can easily get into you can easily hit 15, I think. Adding Ridley, I was a big Ridley guy. I think that's great for this team. Same Tony Pollard, I think that's another one. So I do think there's definitely big potential for Will Levis, and I'm certainly, like you said, Eric, I wouldn't mind actually in Superflex leagues if I have to, like deep leagues, have him as my QB2. But obviously, ideally, that QB3 would be nice. But I'm definitely on Will Levis this year.
If they don't make playoffs, and if he doesn't produce, or say he has a mid-season, are they moving on from him? Do you see them moving on from him?
I don't really see it. Excuse me. Yeah, I just you know, when you invest in like the draft capital that they did, and we were all, well, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people were shocked that he was still, you know, like available. You know, he had the Aaron Rodgers puppy dog look going on while he was, you know, sitting there waiting to be drafted. But I just think you need to be patient and just give a quarterback time. So if it doesn't really come together this season, I think you'll have like another season to do it. And the reason I say that is because, you know, with him not being the starter at the beginning of the season, it was like in the middle of the season, you know, where he had to end up making that transition. Mm-hmm. I just feel like they're going to give him more time, especially with adding like Calvin Ridley. They got Hopkins that's there. I just don't think you want to shake it up, or we're not giving them enough time to kind of trying to think of the right words to fulfill, I guess, the prophecy, so to speak. I couldn't get my words together on that, but I just think you need to give them more time. I'll just kind of end there.
Okay.
I mean, the only reason I think they move on is if they win like 3 or 4 games and mm-hmm. they play him for most of the season. Like, I don't think that's happening. I think they'll win a lot more games than that, and you know, it'll just be how he performs.
Mm-hmm.
Kyler Murray, Jaden Daniels, Jordan Love, Will Levis, our 4 rising quarterback stars to break out in 2024. Let's go on to the running backs. Keith, you're on the clock. Who's your rising star?
I'm on the clock. I'm going with Chase Brown for the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't think we've seen a whole lot of him. He's only had like 179 yards total. And everybody wants to go in on Zach Moss because they got Zach Moss. But like, who's Zach Moss? Like an average guy that does fine. I don't think he's going to break out and win you a fantasy league. But I'd rather take a chance. Like, I think Zach Moss is going to ADP 25. You've got Chase Brown down to 38. I mean, I'd rather take a chance later on in my drafts with Chase Brown. He was explosive last year when he got his chances behind Joe Mixon. I think, you know, there's enough time for him early on to beat out Moss if he stays healthy. So I think he's a guy later on that has potential, you know, to win you a league. I think he's explosive. I really like Chase Brown.
A lot of crickets for Keith.
Every time, guys.
All right, Gary, you go, and then I'll chime in. It's like, who's going to dive in? Let's go.
Yeah. No, that's a great pick, Keith. We've talked about him a lot on the show, I feel like. I love him. Last year I didn't, because I was a Joe Mixon owner in a few leagues, and all my fellow Joe Mixon owners felt the same way seeing him come on the field. And it wasn't necessarily the fact that he was getting these touches, but he was doing them so well. He looked so good on the field when he got the ball. And I think that you're exactly right. He's going to get so much work this year. I think that he is a great breakout candidate. The Bengals seem to love him. So, yeah, definitely keep your eye on Chase Brown this year.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is that I'm in on the Chase Brown train. I know in all the mock drafts that we're doing as a staff at ESPN, like Chase Brown is one of my most rostered players, like to the tune of I think in around 56 or 57% of our drafts, like I'm making sure that I land him. I love him as a like RB4 or RB5. There's obviously upside for more if he gets more touches, but Zach Moss isn't a guy that you want to give 20 plus touches a game to. So I do see Brown being like involved, but I think he's well positioned to exceed his average draft position and expectation. So I'm in.
Yeah, Keith, as much as I want to disagree with you, I actually do like Chase Brown. I have him finishing with more fantasy points than Zach Moss. And I mean, Chase Brown right now is being drafted in ESPN leagues as the RB43. So, yeah. I mean, it makes complete sense why, Eric, you're getting him in almost every league because he's a steal at the RB43. I mean, I have him finishing as the RB23 or 24. So a solid low-end RB2, maybe even an RB3 if you have 3 RBs or flex. I mean, he's a great guy. He's going to probably end the season as the lead back over Zach Moss, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So, Gary, what's your guy?
Yeah, I'm going to stay in the AFC North and go with
you love this guy,
Pittsburgh's own Jaylen Warren. I really don't, as a Browns fan, I don't like any Steeler, but their running backs just jump out to me. I've always drafted Najee. I've had to bite the bullet a few times, but I always click on his name when it's my turn to draft. I don't know why, but I think the guy this year is his teammate. I think that Pittsburgh loves Jaylen Warren. He runs it efficiently. He catches it efficiently. He's a stud. Nothing more that I can say to that, I guess. I statted him at RB8. I'm not quite sure where he's going in terms of ADP, but I think he's going to smash it.
He's right now being drafted in ESPN leagues as the RB26, one spot ahead of Najee Harris.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those scenarios whenever like we're all in drafts is for where if you want to target that backfield, you just kind of wait to see who's available, Warren or Harris. But I'm with you. Warren is the guy that I would rather have on my roster. You look at last year, he had career highs across the board in rushing and receiving. And he'll be actively involved in the backfield this year because you look at the Steelers, they made it clear that they want to move on from Najee Harris at the end of this season. Like, I still believe it'll be a committee, and I think Warren can be effective that way. But I really like him as a high-end flex option, but he does have RB2 upside. And so he's definitely someone that you should target at his ADP right now, in my opinion.
I like Warren. But the problem is, I don't think he'll fall far enough for me in drafts. They're on about mixing in Cordero Patterson, that's going to be a nightmare in there as well with Najee. So it's probably a backfield I'll stay away from. But if I had to pick one out of the tree, it's definitely Warren. I'd be going for.
Yeah, I mean Warren's no doubt. I was always a Najee Harris fan for the longest time until Big Ben. He retired, and then you really noticed that Najee Harris could not succeed without the dumps that Big Ben was doing. And that's exactly why I think Jaylen Warren has really proved himself in that role and how he's going to succeed. And maybe not RB8 like Gary has him. I have him as a top 20 running back, though, and I think that's pretty fair.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it is. Yeah. Fancy Pros here has him as 31, by the way.
Wow. That's even farther down.
Yeah.
Eric, talk to us about your guy, because I tell you what, I like this guy a lot. He's having technical difficulties.
Don't even worry about it. Yeah.
While he figures out his mic, I'll talk to you about my guy, because Eric can obviously hear us still. I'll go with my guy, and I think you guys are probably going to disagree with him. It's Devin Singletary. And I'm going to tell you what, I am not a Singletary fan, but when you really look at the numbers and you really look at everything that Devin Singletary has done this past couple of years, he's actually kind of improving himself. Right now in Fantasy Pros, he's being drafted as the RB34. I have him statted to finish as the RB15. But if you look at the last 9 games he played last season in Houston, he had the 9th most fantasy points scored throughout all running backs. He finished top 10 as a running back 3 of the 9 weeks, top 24, 7 out of the 9 weeks. And in those 9 weeks, he was on pace to have 1,254 rushing yards, which equates to kind of around 243 fantasy points. He would have finished as the RB10 last season. The New York Giants, they don't have Saquon Barkley anymore. They paid money to Singletary to lead the way. This Giants team is a running team, and the Giants have a mid-strength schedule for running backs this season. A lot of them are either favorable matchups for running backs or moderate matchups, and that's why I really like Devin Singletary. They only have some tough matchups like the Eagles that they got to face twice and the Cowboys twice, and then obviously the one game of the 49ers. But other than that, a lot of them are favorable matchups for Devin Singletary. I have him really breaking out this season.
Fernando, have we not taught you anything on this show yet? Man, he's part of a terrible team, regardless of how much you like Devin Singletary. It's going to be a terrible New York Giants team. Terrible offensive line. Daniel Jones is terrible. I mean, I don't see it happening, I'm afraid. On a better team, maybe, but I'm not totally against him as a player, but the team he's on, I don't see it happening at all.
Neither do I, Keith. We're in the same boat here.
Come on, guys. Come on.
Freddie, we talked about this a few weeks ago. You know how I feel about this clown. But, I mean, come on now. We saw what he did in Houston. Pretty much nothing. And Houston's line is better than the Giants. It's not great, but it's better than the Giants. I don't think that him running behind the Giants line is going to be better for him, obviously. And I agree with Keith in the sense that the team is bad, so the ball is just not really going to be moved. It's going to be tough, I think, for him to get in the end zone a lot. I don't see him being efficient. He never really was. So I'm sorry, Freddie. I disagree with this thing.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
We can.
Okay. Well, you know what? I think this mic, I love this mic. I've loved it for a while, but I think with the USB component on it, it may be on its last leg. But we will try to go with it. You guys ready for me to get in the mic guy?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Hey, that's the thing about live streams and then in TV. You got to adapt. So I'm going to go with Zamir White here. So what I like about Zamir White, we look back to last season, right? Over the last 4 games, he had at least 20 touches in each of those games. He had Josh Jacobs dealing with the quadriceps injury, and White accumulated 457 total yards. He's a top 10 running back during that time frame. And one thing about Antonio Pierce, who's now he was the interim head coach then, but now he is the head coach. I'm like, he likes to lean heavily on the running game, and I expect that to continue in 2024. I know we talked earlier about the quarterback situation in Las Vegas, so because of that, might as well lean on White and Alexander Madison and the others. But I think White, he's just underneath the top 25 in ESPN leagues in terms of RB ADP. You got the Raiders. They did add Alexander Madison, but he was so inefficient last season. We remember how terrible that guy was. So I don't think he's really a threat. So I like White as really like a solid RB2 or high-end flex option. He's projected in our projections at ESPN to lead the backfield in touches. And another thing that I like with the Raiders is that they're returning 4 starters to the offensive line. And I do like the offseason additions that they've added. So if someone does get injured, you've got someone that's of quality to fill that void. So I just really like White this year.
Yeah, I like it a lot. Zamir White is definitely a guy that I thought about in this position too. But obviously I had Jalen Warren going so high, so I just went with him. But yeah, I'm actually glad that you brought up Alexander Madison, because if you didn't, I would have. People were in question if he was up to a starting role, and now we see that he's really not. So I think that the Raiders are going to mix him in every now and then, but they know that, he's not a guy that is going to start or even split 50-50 touches. So I think that favors Zamir White, obviously, so much. And completely agree. The quarterback situation is up in the air. Normally, teams lean right on their running backs. So I think Zamir White is destined for a great season, a full season, I should say, now that Josh Jacobs is in Green Bay.
Yeah, I agree. I can see Zamir White having the workhorse role here. Really like him. I think Madison, I don't think is much of a threat. Pretty much add to all you guys. I think I'd be happy with him as a flex type of option in fantasy this season. And I think he is ADP here as 25. I think he's going to smash that, at the end of the season.
I really like Zamir White, and I really wish I statted him a lot better than I did. I even have him really getting most of the touches, but I have him actually finishing as the RB33. And I mean, I know, Keith, last season you told me how I was all into Zamir White, and I still am, but for some reason when I statted it just did not work in favor of Zamir White, unfortunately.
Oh man, I thought you were going to be like way higher than all of a sudden on what you were a big believer last year. I'm surprised with that.
I was.
Touchdown number? Is it the touchdown number? Is that what it was?
I think it was, but I had him getting like 8 touchdowns too. So it's just kind of like, I still have Alexander Madison's doing some work. Like he still gets about 300, 400 in between those yardage. But other than that, I mean, Zamir White just doesn't break 1,000 for me. But I think this is the stepping stone that he'll need. Next season is a season I think he'll really smash it. So, quickly, before we move on, Eric, do you like Devin Singletary?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, okay. I'm glad.
My audio's coming in. For some reason, it was routing the audio or the mic through the webcam, but I'm a loud speaker, so hopefully it picked everything up. But no, I do like Devin Singletary because mainly because of his ADP. You look at his average draft position. He's very an inexpensive kind of RB3 or flex option, and the touches will be there. He's clearly not Saquon. But he can be productive when given the touches. So I don't mind him. He's not someone that I'm aggressively targeting, but when I find myself in drafts and I need an RB3 or RB4, depending on how I'm building the team, I'll draft some Devin Singletary.
I just wanted to see if I had someone on my side. I know Keith and Gary are anti-Devin Singletary, but it's okay. It's okay. We'll keep the haters on the other side. But those are our running back breakouts: Devin Singletary, Chase Brown, Jaylen Warren, and Zamir White. Let's get into the receiving core. Eric, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm when I look at wide receivers, a guy that I'm aggressively targeting in drafts, and someone that ends up on a high percentage of my teams, like in these ESPN mock drafts that we're doing. And by mock drafts, I mean we're trying to do at least 40 or more mock drafts as a staff. Wow. So it's going to be, we've been able to see the guys that we are targeting, and Deontay Johnson is one for me. I'm like, he averaged 8.3 targets per game in his career. As we all know, I'm like, it hasn't always translated to fantasy points, as he's averaged just 11.1 fantasy points over the last 2 seasons. But in Carolina, I'm like, Johnson has minimal competitions for targets. He's be working with Bryce Young in his second year. There's a coaching change too that needs to be discussed. Many people expect the Panthers offense to improve under Dave Canales. And we saw what he did for Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield's career. And I just love Johnson's average draft positions right now, especially in ESPN leagues. And he's one of the few wide receivers at his ADP right now who could easily see 100 or more targets. So I love him as a wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4, again, depending on how you're building your team.
I'm on the fence with him. I think he's going to kind of be right around where his ADP is. I've never been a big Deontay Johnson fan, and statting him, it just could not work. Where I tried giving him some benefit of the doubt, and it just did not work. So I'm against it on Deontay Johnson, but that's my take on Deontay.
Yeah, I'm in on Deontay, especially at the ADP 38 here. I'm looking at it on Fantasy Pros. I mean, the one worry is Bryce Young for me, just what we've seen last year. I mean, Dave Canales coming in. Hopefully you can turn him around, like you obviously said, Eric. But at his ADP, I think he's definitely worth taking later on in drafts. And like I think he's going to probably be that nice safety blanket in the slot for Bryce Young. So he will. I don't know how high his ceiling will be, but I think he'll have a solid floor each week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Freddie, I agree with you. It must be a bias thing. I've never been a fan of Deontay either. Obviously, the drop situation has always been there in his career. But maybe he needed to go somewhere else. Carolina, I wouldn't say is the top destination on players lists, but who knows? Maybe that change of scenery helps. He's got the young Bryce Young, who I think people are already, just throwing out the window, which I think is a bad idea. I think that you have to go by the 3-year rule for quarterbacks or just young players as a whole. So I don't know. I think that he could very well smash his ADP, but I also think that he could go below it. I'm kind of on the fence with Deontay as well.
Yeah, I have him as the wide receiver 42. His ADP was wide receiver 38. So it's still right around that. But again, Bryce Young is kind of what's holding me back. I'm not a Bryce Young believer. Eric, I don't know if you are, but that could also be the reason why.
Yeah, I'll kind of chime in briefly on that. Just want to make sure we can get through all these players in time. But I like Bryce Young. He's kind of similar to Will Levis for me. He's got a great offensive mind that he's able to learn from this year. They've been proactive to try to surround him with playmakers, bringing in a Deontay Johnson. And so I do like Young, but he's not anyone I'm aggressively targeting. Again, I think he's a solid like QB3, like in Superflex formats. I'm even comfortable with him as a low end QB2. But I do see a progression from him. He's not going to finish as a QB1 in fantasy, but I think a QB2 finish isn't out of the realm of possibility for someone like Bryce Young, given his circumstances.
Okay. Gary, you're on the clock. Who's your wide receiver breakout?
So I'm going to go back to the AFC North and go with Ravens, Zay Flowers. I think that he's going to be so much better than last year. I believe he finished wide receiver 30, which was crazy to me when I went back and looked at it because I remember him having such a solid rookie year. But of course, actual on the field production doesn't always translate to fantasy. But I think it's going to this year. Last year, he had 8 or more targets in 7 games. I think that number is going to stay the same, if not be a lot higher. I think Mark Andrews coming back, I think helps him more than hurts him, to be honest with you. Obviously, Mark Andrews is going to get his targets, but he's going to be such a focal point on the defense that Zay Flowers is going to use his speed to just go right past defenders. I really, really love how the Ravens look. I think that RPO is going to be ridiculous with Lamar and Derrick Henry, and that obviously also opens up more opportunities for Zay Flowers. So Zay Flowers is my guy. I think he's going to be great.
I like it a lot.
You go.
I like him a lot. I have him. I mean, he's being drafted as a low-end wide receiver 2. I think he's easily going to be a wide receiver 2, and he has the potential to be a wide receiver 1 in that offense.
Yeah, I'm not afraid to say this. I just see Zay Flowers even leading the Ravens in targets this year over Mark Andrews. So I'm like, the targets should be there, and he's talented enough to perform. So I'm in.
Perfect.
He's the one guy I'd be afraid to hit draft on. Because every year we hear Lamar's going to throw more. And yeah, okay. It doesn't really pan out that way. I want Mark Andrews, and that's kind of it. I love Zay Flowers' talent. I do, really do. But I'm just thinking, I think he's going to do more damage on your team at the end of it.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good. Keith, let's go with your guy.
My guy, George Pickens, for the Steelers, he had over 1,100 yards last season, only 5 touchdowns, though. This season, he's the clear number 1 wide receiver. It's him, Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin. Gets an upgrade, in my opinion, anyways, as a Seahawk fan. Quarterback with Russell Wilson. I can see him getting double-digit touchdowns. His current ADP is like wide receiver 27 right now. I think he can get inside the top 15. I really do. He's got buckets of talent. Maybe a little bit of an attitude problem that he needs to calm down a little bit. But I think from a talent standpoint, he is one of the best, I think. And I really like him. I think I'll be taking a lot of chances on George Pickens this year.
Yeah. No, I love it. No, that's that's there's some risk obviously there, but I think the upside is so immense, and he's someone that I've been wanting to target in ESPN leagues. I'm not pulling the trigger, hitting the button fast enough. I know Matt Bowen one of my colleagues is really, really high on Pickens. So I know he's aggressively targeting him. And the one thing about Pickens that I love, you look back from last season, I'm like, he's got that big play ability. I'm like, he logged like 4 games of 20 or more points. You know, he had that season high, 35.5 points against the Bengals in week 16. And I just also like that he's got like 14 receptions on throws of 20 or more like air yards. And I don't care if Russell Wilson's under center or Justin Fields. I'm like, this guy's going to get his. So I think everyone should target him. So I'm in.
Yeah, me and Matt Bowen could probably relate a lot because I started him to finish as wide receiver 7, which was shocking to me because I didn't think he would be all the way up there for me. But he really has the potential to. With Deontay Johnson not there anymore, he's clear cut number 1. It's really the quarterback play. Do we trust Russell Wilson or whoever the quarterback is in Justin Fields? That's really the biggest question. I mean, Eric, you and I talked about it a couple of years ago how Russell Wilson was going to help this offense in Denver and just did not work out. So I really hope it does work out.
Yeah, no, you're right. It didn't. But I think the bigger thing from what was already mentioned is about with the targets. You know, there's no Deontay Johnson that's here. So I just don't see a scenario where George Pickens doesn't get 115 or more targets easily in this offense, which is going to bode well for fantasy for him. So,
good player for sure. There's just something off, in my opinion. I don't know what it is. I love George Pickens as a player, but you see his yard per catch number so high, and I think that's really what I don't want to say carried his statistics last season, but he didn't have a high touchdown number. You look at Russell Wilson, the way he's played at Denver the past few years. He really spread the ball out a lot. Again, that's Denver. He didn't really have the true wide receiver 1 that people thought Courtland Sutton would be. Now he has George Pickens, who I think universally everybody can agree is going to be better than Courtland Sutton and will be a true wide receiver 1, whether it's this year or in a few. But right now, I don't know if I can say that George Pickens is going to go crazy over his ADP like a lot of people do. I think he'll be right around it.
Okay. My guy for the wide receivers to round out the wide receivers is Keon Coleman, and I'm not a guy to really go into rookies as having a breakout right away, but Keon Coleman is, I think personally, the clear-cut wide receiver 1 there. I don't think Shakir is going to be the wide receiver 1, and I don't think Curtis Samuel is a wide receiver 1 wide receiver. I think he's a wide receiver 2 in that offense. Diggs and Davis is gone. That's 241 targets that needs to be distributed to somewhere and to someone. 15 total touchdowns that they had last season. That's all going to need to go somewhere. Josh Allen's the QB1 in fantasy. He's going to continue to be that, and they're going to need someone to step up, and that's Keon Coleman. I mean, the last 2 seasons in college, 1,456 yards, 18 touchdowns, averaged 13.5 yards per reception. He's really good, and I think he's a shot going wide receiver 47 when I have him finishing as a wide receiver 2, flex, wide receiver 3 kind of player.
Yeah, love this pick, Fernando. Don't really get the ADP. Like, he's going behind Xavier Worthy, Ladd McConkey. Don't really get that, in my opinion. I think with Josh Allen there, I know there's been kind of rumblings that he's been maybe, struggling a little bit to understand the offense, but I think he'll be fine come the season. And I really like the pick. I think he'll smash that ADP.
Yeah, and I do like Keon Coleman. I just find myself gravitating more towards like Curtis Samuel. And I know if we have a chance to talk kind of deeper sleepers, I'm like, he's my guy. So I'll kind of hold that off if we're still able to touch on that. But I just really prefer Curtis Samuel. I've got my reasons.
Okay.
I like Coleman. I think he's going to be a good player for Josh Allen, just due to the fact that he is such a big body, and his contested catch ability is going to mold well with Josh Allen's arm talent. I think he's going to have a great season in terms of production, but not so much for fantasy. But I think he'll still be fantasy relevant. Not really a guy I'd be itching to get, though. In a few years, though, he could be a really, really great player.
Keon Coleman, George Pickens, Zay Flowers, and Deontay Johnson rounding out the rising stars for us, breaking out for wide receivers. Let's go into the tight ends. Gary, we'll start with you first. Who is your rising star for the tight ends?
Yeah, it's going to be Dalton Kincaid, Keon Coleman's new teammate. I can't get enough of him. I think he's going to be such a great player. I love the fact that he's a wide receiver, tight end, hybrid type player.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Allen loves him. He targeted him a lot last year. And I think with the fact that Diggs is gone, Freddie, you had mentioned it, there's going to be so many targets that need to go somewhere. I think a lot of them are going to be poured into Dalton Kincaid.
I like it. I think with Keon Coleman there and Curtis Samuel there's going to be more targets distributed to them versus Kincaid, but I still think Kincaid's really, really good. I think he's still a low-end tight end one, in my opinion, but I think he's really good overall.
Yep, I'm on board with that. I think great red zone target Josh Allen seems to look for as well. So yeah, I'm a guy definitely looking for Kincaid in drafts.
Yeah, and I would agree with the previous comments. It's a lot of, I'd say it's a high number of middle round like tight ends. I think that are great, great targets. Like Kyle Pitts, Evan Ingram, Dalton Kincaid. I think those are guys I would rather have than like a George Kittle or like a David Njoku. So definitely a lot of value at that stage of the draft.
Okay. I'll jump in with my guy, and this is a guy that broke out last season, but he's still being undervalued in drafts. Evan Ingram is my fantasy breakout for tight ends because last 2 seasons he's finished as a top 6 tight end, and he's being drafted as a tight end 7 again. He had career highs in targets, catches, yards, setting the franchise record with Jacksonville with 114 catches last season. Calvin Ridley, gone. Dunzo. He's out. That means Ingram, I think, is going to get more of it. Now, they did bring Brian Thomas in, but if you look at the season that Christian Kirk was the wide receiver 1 in that team, he still produced. Evan Ingram was still producing, and I think he's going to be really good once again. And he's already mentioned how he wants to become more of a deep threat guy, make bigger plays, have more touchdowns. He only had 8.4 yards per reception, which ranked 26th among tight ends, and only 4 touchdowns, which was 12th among them. So obviously, if he tries to improve on those 2, he's going to smash it once again this season. And Trevor Lawrence does like him. And I think even with Gabe Davis also being in the mix, I think there's easily 100 targets still going to Evan Ingram. I think I have him at like 130 targets or somewhere around that line.
Yeah, I'm in on Evan Ingram. I think he's the safety blanket for Trevor Lawrence, but he does need, I think, an uptick in touchdowns. So that's, I think, what he had only 4 or 5 last year. I don't think it was that many.
His career high 6.
Yeah, and he had 900 odd yards. So I think he needs to, an uptick in touchdowns. But I do think he's a nice safety blanket, and then he's definitely one. I think if he gets steady receptions, it's easy to come top 15 in fantasy with tight end, and like he's a guy that could definitely get into that top 5.
Yeah, I think the thing with Ingram is that I know he led all tight ends like in targets and receptions like last year. You mentioned the great rapport with Trevor Lawrence. Probably my biggest concern is like you bring in Gabe Davis, you draft Brian Thomas Jr. You still have Christian Kirk on this team. Will the targets be there? I don't see him getting 143 targets. But even if that drops down to say 110 or 115, is he still going to be productive? And it may even be some people that'll say, well, hey, Calvin Ridley, I can't think of the exact number, but he had a high percentage, a high number of red zone targets. So it's like, say, well, what if, Ingram inherits those, which, it's possible he does. But I would say that's my only concern. But where he's going in drafts at his ADP, I think he's still a solid pickup. I just think finishing more between tight end 7 to 10 is realistic, and maybe not like top 5 like he did in 2023. So again, it's Fernando. It's not like I can say, hey, that's bad. Evan Ingram's bad, because he isn't. It's just about context. Like where you're drafting him. Are you drafting him at ADP, or are you reaching, or you're getting him a round or 2 late, which is possible because people are like, that 2023 season was a fluke. If someone like that is like that in your league, take advantage of it, right?
Yeah, I completely see your point. I mean, when he's not injured, though, he finishes as top 6 tight end, and I think he's really elite. When he was on the Giants, hated him, but Jacksonville, love him now.
Yeah.
But
sorry, I just wanted to add a few things. In his last 5 games, he had 12 or more targets. in his 3 of his last 5 games, he had 12 more targets. I think that shows that T-Law was really, really relying on him late down in the season. I think Moody, you made a great comment about the fact that those targets might not just be there this year with all those new guys coming in, but we see it all the time. The red zone targets, tight ends inherit a lot of them. You know, you think it's always going to be the top guy, the top wide receiver 1 on a fade, or, you know, wide receiver 2 getting in there. No, sometimes it's just those sneaky tight ends are just going to sit there right in the middle in the open end zone, and they're going to be right there. And I think that is going to be more of the season that we see from Evan Ingram. So he might not be tight end 3 or whatever he was last year. But I think he's got the chance to do it just due to the fact that I think he's going to have a lot more touchdowns this year, and at least touchdown opportunities.
Yeah.
And Keith, we'll go to you. But just quick side note, he has the most targets and catches for tight ends in the last 2 seasons combined.
Nice. Well, Fernando, you know how I like to play the tight end position. I usually go last or second last when I'm drafting, so that's how I've kind of went this way. I went for Greg Dulcich, a guy way down the board. I think, you know, he's been banged up the last 2 seasons, but I think he's looked pretty good when he's been out there. He's got no competition at the tight end position. I think it's Troutman is the next one up. Yeah, he's like tight end 36. I always go late flyers looking for upside. I mean, if he stays healthy, I think he can definitely help your team. He could end up being Bo Nix's safety blanket, as I like to call it. So, yeah, I'd take a flyer on Greg Dulcich.
Don't mind it. Yeah, you had mentioned his real only competition is Adam Troutman. We could see him be like a guy that sneaks into the top, 15 to 18 tight ends. And I don't know where he's being drafted, but it's for sure going to be a lot less than that. So I don't hate it. Not bad.
Yeah, no, I don't mind it. I'm trying to think about, like, in ESPN leagues, what is Dulcich what is his ADP? I feel like it's definitely outside of like the top 30 tight ends. So I don't mind it. I know it's just one guy if I'm really waiting late on tight end and maybe taking like a committee approach. I know like Cade Otton's one guy in Tampa Bay, that I do like to kind of pair with another tight end to play the matchups. So I'll just throw another name out there too if someone really wants to wait on tight ends. So.
Yeah, Greg Dulcich on Fantasy Pros is going as a tight end 33. But again, like you mentioned, Keith, if Bo Nix ends up being like decently good that we're hoping, Dulcich could beat out Troutman and he could be sneaking into that tight end 15 range.
Yep, definitely.
Eric, you're going to finish off the Rising Stars. Who is the Rising Star for you?
Yeah, I'll try to go as quickly as possible. So I'm gonna go with Kyle Pitts here. So I know that everyone was, kind of burned by Kyle Pitts. He had the solid rookie season, but then after that, it's really gone downhill. So basically, over the last 2 seasons, you've got Arthur Smith, former Falcons coach, really relegated Pitts to a blocking role. Really didn't leverage his athleticism and mismatches, against against linebackers. And so one thing with Pitts, he ran just 20% of his total routes with a linebacker in coverage over that time frame. We know about the quarterback situation in woes in Atlanta. Like 65% of his targets were uncatchable. But there's a ray of sunshine, right? You've got Raheem Morris, new head coach, and he brought in offensive coordinator Zach Robinson, who was part of the Sean McVay coaching tree. So it's his first OC gig, which is exciting. You bring in Kirk Cousins, so that situation should improve. So I just feel like Robinson has been in the type of environment where he can easily position Kyle Pitts for success and really have a more balanced offense than what Arthur Smith did. So I do like Pitts as a low-end tight end 1 at his average draft position. So if you're looking for another guy like in the middle rounds like Evan Ingram, Dalton Kincaid, add Kyle Pitts to that list, who has the potential to finish as a top 5 fantasy tight end. So I'm really big on Pitts and really this entire Falcons offense this year.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you. I love Kirk Cousins, and I think he favors tight ends a lot. I think Pitts will finally be used correctly. I was never big on him when he came in as a rookie, but I think with Kirk Cousins there and the type of offense they're going to have, I think Kyle Pitts is finally got the chance to really, really break out to his true potential form that we want him to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think the problem is with Pitts is he's burnt a lot of people over the years. I wasn't one of them because I didn't take him or haven't got him. But I think this year I will be in on him, especially with Kirk Cousins and the new head coach and all that. So I think if there's a year ever you want Pitts, it's this year.
Yeah, Keith pretty much took everything I wanted to say. I wasn't one of the guys that drafted him the past couple of years, but I probably will be this year. I think that Kirk Cousins is a great fit for what Kyle Pitts needs. And I think that we're finally going to see the production that we expected from Pitts. I started him as tight end 10. I could very well see him cracking the top 7 and even top 5. I really wouldn't be surprised at all. I have his touchdown targets going up a lot higher than what they were. So Kyle Pitts, great pick.
Obviously, Evan Ingram, Greg Dulcich, Dalton Kincaid, and Kyle Pitts rounding out our rising stars. But we do have one special segment that we do want to quickly get into. It's just going to be, we're going to state our case on the guy, and we're going to go around the table, love or hate. That's the only things we can say to our arguments on these dark horse sleepers. And I'll start with it. Ezekiel Elliott, RB39 expected ADP, RB12 projected to finish. Last couple games, I think last 6 games, 15.9 PPR fantasy points, would have been a top 12 running back. In fact, in RB4 last season on that pace. Back in Dallas, no competition, touchdown machine, sky's the limit for Zeke. He's got one more season left to go. Go get him.
At his ADP, I
Love.
Keith, you're up.
I went for J.K. Dobbins. Obviously, the health issues are the big thing, but I think he's definitely a sneaky guy. If he is back and he gets a run of games and he stays healthy, he's the RB49, what I can see here. So, I just think he could be a league winner, and you'd be picking him right at the end of your drafts.
As much as I'd love to say love, one of my favorite Buckeyes of all time, hate.
Yeah, I'm going to go with hate it.
You got 3 hates.
Cool. Sounds good.
Gary, go for yours.
Yeah, and another reason why I said hate is because I have his teammate, Gus Bus. I think that he is going to be a possible breakout star. Eckler had made a comment, the fact that the Chargers don't or want a guy that's going to get 20-plus carries a game. I think Gus Bus is a guy that can do it. And we saw, I believe yesterday, the Chargers and Gus Edwards were on the same page that he's going to step into this main, starting role. So I think that he's going to get so much work this year, and I think he's a serious breakout candidate.
Love.
I have to say hate, so. No choice.
Could both love him. Could love them both.
No. We lost Eric.
We lost the mic. The mic went down again.
Oh, you can't.
We can hear you. We can hear you now.
He laughed too much. He shut off the mic.
I keep looking at the light. I'm like, the light's on. I don't want to retire this mic. This mic has been with me for many years. But no, I'm glad you guys can hear me. So I need to go now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay. Might as well. Hopefully, you can hear me. So I'm gonna go Curtis Samuel just real quick. I'm like, dynamic as a receiver and a rusher. He's part of the Bills offense now that ranks 5th in total yards per game and 6th in points scored per game. And he's got Josh Allen as quarterback in a clear path to targets because Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis are no longer there. So you guys love it or hate it?
LOVE, love it.
You sold it so well, but I'm on hate.
Love it. Go Buckeyes.
Well, that's going to do it. Before we wrap up the show, Eric, talk to us about what your upcoming plans are. What are you doing? And where can people follow you? Obviously, besides Eric and Moody, of course.
Yeah, no, I can do that. No, thanks for the invite, as always, and thanks for putting up with my my mic issues. May have to retire this one, but everyone can find me at Eric N. Moody on Twitter or X, whichever you call it, same platform. So if you like NBA, NFL, WNBA, fantasy sports, and sports betting, I'm your guy. And if you also like a little bit of a dash of of pop culture and music, hey, you'll be right at home. The biggest thing for me with stuff that's coming up, just to kind of close this out, is a lot of fantasy football content for the rest of July and also in August. But I would just tell everyone, check out my article that's published at ESPN.com/fantasy right now about the Atlanta Falcons and why you should be bullish on that offense. So follow me on X, all social media platforms, and check the article out.
At Eric and Moody. Appreciate Eric coming on once again to our show. Again, if you haven't done so already, go to trophysmack.com/sportstime HQ. Go get yourself a trophy, ring, belt. Maybe help out your trophies, add to those collections, brag about your trophies that you have with your fantasy league mates. And again, use code SportsTimeHQ on Underdog Fantasy. They'll match first deposit up to $100. And if you want to win, go check out the articles that Eric writes about these teams. That's how you're going to win it. Once again, that's going to do it here. I was joined by my great co-hosts as well. Keith, go follow him all over social media at SwamDonkey_90. Gary, go follow him all over social media at Gary.Dombeck. I'm Fernando. You can follow me at SportsTimeHQ. We'll be back next week on Wednesday, where we'll have NFL fantasy analyst Marcus Grant on the show. And we'll see you all next Wednesday.